let me say hello to everybody. Good evening. Thanks for being here on a Sunday night. I don't know what time zone you're in, but it's 8:30 Eastern time for me. So I'm going to hopefully share what you think is a lot of good information, but I'm going to try and make it brief so we don't go too late into the evening. Please ask questions. I will try and get to as many of them as possible. If I can't, I usually look through the questions and summarize the answers and send them in the follow-up email that we'll send out tomorrow. So before we really get started, let me just give you some ground rules about how these meetings generally work. This is a meeting. It's not a webinar. Personally, all through COVID and before COVID, that's the way we did things. I think it's just nicer. It's nice to see people who are willing to be on camera. So thank you for the people who are. And if you don't want to be on camera, that's fine too. But it also gives the opportunity for people to unmute themselves if they want and ask a question, which also, is sometimes helpful because it's sometimes, you can't always write exactly what you want to ask in a chat. So feel free to interrupt me if that's the case. And of course, you can always ask your question in the chat as well. This is recorded. We will send out a recording tomorrow, a link to the recording if you can't, stay to the end, or if you want to watch it over again. And, that's about all my beginning stuff. So love to hear who's here, where you're from, how many kids you have. I'm assuming most everybody here at least has a junior in high school, but you might have a sophomore in high school as well. But so love to kind of hear and see where people are from, and we will really dig in and get started.
Hi, I'm Olga. I'm in Houston, Texas, and I'm sorry if you hear my son playing piano in the background, but I'll turn off the mic in a minute. But I have two 13-year-olds who's doing his practicing now, and a 16-year-old junior in high school.
That's great. Thank you, Olga. Thanks for letting us know. It was fun to hear that little music going in the background. So it's good that, a lot of things happening in everybody's house on a Sunday night, people getting ready for the rest of the week. And I see lots of people from New Jersey, Maryland. Oops, did somebody else want to say something? I see that Andrea, you unmuted.
Oh, okay. Maybe I did unmute. Yeah. So we are from Philadelphia, and we have a son who is a junior.
Right. Good. Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
I'm actually in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so I don't know if you knew that, but so I'm close by.
Okay.
Okay, great. Lots of people from all over: Boston, New Jersey, Kentucky, Madison. Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for sharing where you're at. And I guess my one other question before we get started is how much college searching have you done so far? Have you, this is, I would imagine, like for the juniors, you're kind of just, some people have started already, which is fine. Some people haven't, and they're kind of waiting for this, sometimes spring break, to kick it off and go to college visits. So just seeing what people have said so far. So some people have visited 5 schools so far. Other people are just starting. Yep. Okay. Yeah. This the next few weeks, and thank goodness, I think, things will start to be back to normal for people visiting colleges. It's been the past 2 years that so many people couldn't visit, and they had to go through this process. So you guys have fared a little better. You're going to do better, in terms of having to deal with all of the COVID stuff, or not having to deal with it this season. So that's great.
Read some of these.
Okay. Oh, so somebody saw Drexel today. Again, that's close by. That's a fun visit. Okay. So let me share my screen and we will get started. And okay, oops. Okay. Again, thumbs up. Can you guys see the screen? Okay, good. Thank you. And let me just get my chat window open so I can see those questions. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk about college merit aid and how you find it. To tell you the truth, I shortened this presentation a little bit, and I'm going to flip it because and kind of get into the data and college insights and how you use it, because I had a lot of people who always have questions that they like to hear about the merit scholarships, you know, like the background of merit scholarships, but they kind of walk away sometimes feeling that they don't really know how to understand the data. So I thought I would try and get into it faster. And then if I have more time, I'll backtrack and go back to some of the information that I might normally give first. Okay, but just to set the ground of what merit aid is, and that word, it's sometimes people say merit aid, merit scholarships, in this whole space of college money, college financial aid, a lot of the terminology is confusing. But you know, another phrase that you might also hear is institutional aid, and basically the type of merit that I talk about tonight is money that is coming from the colleges, and it is money that is being granted to students based on some criteria that is not based on their finances. So, and the reason I'm trying to make this distinction is because the terminology merit scholarships gets blurred with private scholarships. There are plenty of private scholarships that are based on merit, and the private scholarship doesn't look at the applicant's financial need, but those are private scholarships, and there is a very big difference between private scholarships and institutional scholarships or merit scholarships from colleges. And so tonight it is really just about merit scholarships from colleges. You know, I wanted to make that distinction because a lot of times people are confused about it. Another kind of phrase that people you might hear, and it's not uncommon to think of it that way, but in some sense, merit scholarships, some people viewed it as a discount on tuition because colleges are looking at your student, again, seeing if they are fitting certain criteria that college wants, and then they are basically, you know, giving them a discount. They're saying, we want you for lots of different reasons, and if our tuition might be, making up a number, you know, $60,000, we're willing to give you a $20,000 discount, sorry, a $20,000 scholarship, but really it is a discount. And I would not shy away in our conversations of talking about that, because one of the things that I really want to instill in people is that colleges are businesses just like any other business out there on the in the US or in the world. And so they are looking at their, if you want to make an equivalent to, they're looking at their retail price, they're looking at, you know, what their net price is after they give discounts. They actually have a term called net tuition. You know, and all the principles of general business apply, supply and demand. They're doing advertising. You and your student are the customer. And so when you start to think in that realm, I think it makes sense. And it might be hard for us to think like that because, and I know myself, for a long time, you think of college and you think of your own experience and you think of it as world of academics, you know, in the Ivy Tower. And maybe it used to be like that, but that's kind of broken down a little bit more these days. And everything about college, you know, does work in the circle of business. All of the services around getting your student to college, whether it's the platform that your high school is using, whether it's Naviance or Score, those are businesses. The Common App, you know, it is a business. So, you know, just something to think about. This is honestly the business of getting your student to college, and then it's the business of getting them educated and graduated and then into the workforce. So the other term I just wanted to make a distinction between is national merit scholarships, which is, again, merit aid, but it's not, it's based on your student's PSAT score. And so it, again, doesn't have necessarily anything to do with the merit scholarships that we're going to talk about tonight. Your student can qualify for, you know, a national merit scholarship, still get other merit scholarship money, your student could not qualify for National Merit Scholarship and still receive Merit Scholarship money. So again, just trying to make the distinction between all the fuzzy words out there related to merit. So another question that comes up a lot is Merit Aid, Merit Scholarship renewable? And actually, that's really important to understand. Usually the money that colleges provide for merit is renewable for 4 years. There's usually some criteria related to that. You know, I can't tell you what that is because it varies from each college, and it might even vary within the colleges, you know, on the specific merit scholarship that they're awarding. But it's usually some minimum GPA. And I just say this now because it's important to look at those details, and those are sometimes in the fine details. A college might have a whole set of scholarships that they're offering. Your student, you know, maybe next year this time is actually awarded one. You're all excited, but at the end of the day, you got to look at the requirement that it's going to be that your student needs to meet to receive the merit scholarship for all 4 years. Because the worst situation, and it unfortunately happens, it's not is that your student, you as a family decide your student's going to go to a certain school. It becomes affordable because of the merit scholarships. And then sometimes in sophomore year, the student can't make the minimum GPA and your student loses the merit scholarship. And so they're now already at a school, and that school is going to cost you more money than you expected. So it's really important to know those details. Some scholarships, it's really easy. It's a 3.0, but other scholarships, it's a 3.5. And, you know, I can't say for sure, but I actually think sometimes that's like their little way of the colleges of weeding out. It's kind of like they're using the scholarship to attract the students, and then they weed them out when they're there because, you know, it may not be that easy for all the students who were given that merit scholarship to actually achieve the 3.5. Anyhow, just throwing it out there now because it can't hurt as you're doing all this research to kind of just put that in your back pocket, and as you're looking at merit scholarships to see what some of the requirements are for renewals. And then another issue to think about, again, as you're thinking about costs, is that merit scholarships are usually, whatever they're awarded, again, they could, you know, let's just take a number. Let's say the merit scholarship is $20,000. That's great, but that doesn't increase for the 4 years that your student is there. So your student will get the scholarship money each year, but the cost of tuition will continue to rise. I just say this, and this is kind of comes a little later, but in your planning, in your financial planning, when you're estimating out the 4 years of what it's going to cost to attend college, which you really should look at the 4 years, not look at 1 year, that's something to take into account. So, and you would, to be on the conservative side, I actually would recommend that you estimate a 3 to 5% increase in tuition costs. It is a little crazy, but it usually is at a minimum 3%. Sometimes it's a little higher than that. And so just factor that in when you're looking at all the numbers. So somebody's asking, do schools usually explain all the conditions of merit aid in writing, or do we have to ask for all the details? A great question, Chris. I would say it depends. In theory, they should, and the criteria, they sometimes don't even actually have it on the website before your student applies. They sometimes just send the information when they tell you that your student has been accepted. You know, it's a horrible thing, but in this space of college admissions, the biggest word you'll hear is it depends. It's because there are no regulations and every school kind of does it differently. So I can't say that every school is going to tell you all the details. They should. We would hope that they would, but now you're aware at least, and you'll know if you don't see it to absolutely ask, because make no assumptions, like make no assumptions because they didn't tell you that there aren't requirements. I would always err on the side of asking as much information as possible. So, and you can ask ahead of time too. You can ask now, even before your student's been accepted, you know, do you say you just, and these are actually great questions, I think, for your student to ask an admissions officer. So it kind of gets your student to interact with the admissions office or the admissions officer. And so again, your student's name is on their radar, and that's a good thing to have. So let me see another question here. is there merit for transfer students? That's a really good question. There could be. It's not as plentiful, and it's not offered as much as it is for incoming freshmen. So the biggest merit dollars in general are offered for incoming freshmen. There could be for a transfer student. It's going to tend to be smaller and maybe less infrequent at different schools that you might be looking at. And they may not make it as well known. So again, it's something you just have to ask. So Tanvi is asking, it seems like top level schools don't offer a lot of merit aid since they are not bothered about attracting too many students. Is that about right? Yes, that is about right. This is the principle of your basic supply and demand. The more a school is in demand, the less they feel that the need to have to offer merit scholarships, because they don't have to attract students. It doesn't mean, though, that a school that is attracting students is a bad school in any sense. It's just, in the population of students and where they're applying, if a school is getting enough applications and they are receiving enough students of the type of students that they want to receive, they're probably not going to use their money. Again, think about this as business. It's money that they could probably use for some other purposes. They don't have the need to use that money to attract students. So, and instead, what those top schools do is use their money to supplement need-based aid. So it becomes like a reverse graph. So the more selective a school becomes, definitely they cut back on the amount of merit aid that they offer, to the point where the top schools, the most selective schools, I don't know what number, maybe 20 or even more, don't offer any merit aid, and they're only offering need-based aid. So that's kind of their shift in focus. Okay, let's move on. So there are 3 types of merit aid, and this is where I usually go into more detail, but I'm just going to leave it at this screen and kind of tell you what the 3 types of merit aid are. One's called automatic, competitive, and talent. Maybe kind of self-explanatory, but I'll explain a little bit more detail. So automatic merit aid is when the school is very upfront about all the criteria that they use to award the aid. And it's usually a graph that you will see on their website someplace. It will be either a grid or an actual chart, and it will say, students with this range of GPA or this range of ACT or SAT scores receive this amount of money. And it's pretty clean cut. And personally, I think that those schools are great. They're being very transparent about how they give out their money, and so transparent that they put the grid on their website. And if your student applies and gets accepted, and they meet one of the criteria, what money to expect. So it's not a black hole about how it was decided how much merit aid to receive. I wish, and we're trying to pull together, I can't give you a list to say, these are all the schools that give automatic merit aid. We're trying to pull it together, but there's no resource for that. So we're kind of going school by school, making notes about that. But I would absolutely recommend, and I mean, through all of your research, if you have, and through College Insights, I'll show you, how you'll know that a school offers merit. Once you know a school offers merit, absolutely, you got to research their website. Do they have one of these charts? And then look at the details of the chart. And then what it's also going to be important about the chart is that because of test optional, some schools are still going to tell you certain SATs, ACT scores that they're going to use, but obviously there's a lot more reliance these days on GPA. That's good and bad. That's like a whole nother discussion. But the not so good part of the reliance on GPA is that every school, every college is going to recalculate your students' GPA, and how they recalculate it it may come out to be slightly different than how the high school calculates it, because and I'm not going to go into like a lot of detail, because we can actually have a whole session on just how colleges recalculate GPA. But what I would recommend is that, and again, another great question for your student, either this is a great question to ask in an information session if you're on a tour, or to actually have them email it in, is ask the college and the admissions officer, do you recalculate my GPA? And if so, what classes are being considered to be recalculated? It's most likely going to be the core classes. And then how do you weight or not weight any of my classes if I took APs or honors? And then once you get that information, you should recalculate your students' GPA and kind of look at each school's numbers accordingly. So that's, and the information we have in College Insights is GPA information that the colleges provide, and most of the times it is unweighted. The colleges are trying to make as much of a apples to apples comparison, and the way that they do that is they usually unweight any of the courses that your student took. And again, actually, that's something to think about. And I know it's crazy, but depends on the type of schools that your student is applying to. But sometimes, these harder, more rigorous, really rigorous classes where your student might not get the best grade, if the colleges that they end up applying to and they're applying to for merit are unweighting it, it does sometimes hurt the student who might have taken a more rigorous class and not have gotten as high a grade as they could have in a lower class. It's just something to think about. Depends the type of caliber of school that your student really wants to go after. Okay, and so competitive merit aid is somewhat what it says, but basically it means that your student is going to have to apply for the scholarship. I should have made it more clear on automatic merit aid. When your student sends in the application, all the applications are reviewed. You don't have to specify I want to be reviewed for merit scholarship money. All the applications are looked at and they see, does this applicant meet the criteria for merit scholarship money. But on competitive merit aid, the student usually has to apply. It's a separate application. It might actually be a few more essays to write, but what's also really important about competitive merit aid is that it might have a deadline that is different than the application deadline, and it is usually earlier. So I usually give an example of the University of Southern California. Their deadline for merit scholarship is December 1st. Their regular decision deadline is January 1st. But if you apply January 1st and you had wanted to apply for merit scholarships, it's too late. You missed it. So and those merit scholarship deadlines are pretty, hard and true. And so that's, again, that's the value of all you guys starting early now, is that you will be aware of dates and deadlines. You have the time to factor that in. There are a lot of people, believe it or not, and students and families that don't start really putting together their college list until August, till September, or they might have some colleges and then they start scrambling to add other colleges and they just miss deadlines. And that's the unfortunate thing about this whole process, is that I always say that everybody, you have options no matter where you are in the process, but your options start to diminish, because as you miss deadlines, you just can't roll backwards. So be really aware of deadlines. And lastly, talent merit aid really basically means it's just for the students that have an artistic skill, music, theater, and there's usually a audition that goes along with it. Again, deadlines and dates are important, because there's usually auditions that need to get scheduled by a certain time to be even considered as part of the scholarship process. So keep all of that. So if your student is applying to a school, they have a particular talent, that school is offering merit scholarships for the talent, that is great. Really make sure that you're aware of any deadlines related to auditions or sending in a portfolio or things along those lines. Okay, so the last thing before kind of really get into the data that I just wanted to make everybody aware of, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but again, this goes to the idea that college admissions is a business, and even the term, the admissions office, has been, the name of the admissions office or the role has changed over time, and a lot of it in places it's now called enrollment management, and it's become a big business with a lot, not a lot, there's actually, I should say, there's a few really large consulting companies that work with colleges to help them determine their admission strategy. And a lot of it is based on data that they're collecting over the years and algorithms and demonstrated interest. They're using all the data that they can to put into their own modeling to say, this is the type of student that we marketed to, in the past few years, and this is the type of student that ended up accepting our offer. Again, think of it, it's a marketing funnel, and they have to optimize and make their marketing dollars as efficient as possible. And basically that's what these enrollment management consultants are helping them do. And they are doing that using data. They are doing it using the merit scholarships that they are offering. So believe me that they have purposely figured out that if they offer a student from a certain area with a certain profile of stats, a certain amount of money, they know what the likelihood is of that student accepting. And in a lot of cases, they have factored in that that student actually might come back and appeal, which is a whole nother discussion, which we'll have next year around this time. We're having that with the seniors now. But an appealing basically is that the college has offered, certain, their first kind of offer of merit scholarships. And they're waiting to see some people will come back and say, that's nice. We're interested in the school, but it's still not enough money. And so some schools are known to purposely lowball their first offer to students, knowing that families will come back and ask for more. But again, just want to make you aware of kind of the business behind admissions. And the other reason why I like to make people aware, and hopefully you make your students aware, is that 17, 18-year-olds kind of give out a lot of information, and they don't really think about how is that information going to be used. But there's a lot of websites that I kind of put down under. Honestly, there was a whole article, and I should send it out. It was probably about 2 months ago, about Naviance. And I'm assuming a lot of you guys are aware of Naviance. It's a platform that a large majority of public schools use to manage the college admissions process. But Naviance was selling targeting information that from all the data they had collected about students. And they were they basically had become like an advertising platform. And the parents weren't aware that their students' information was being used like that. Maybe high schools were or weren't aware, but if they were aware, they weren't making families known that was known about it. So it kind of happens in all these different nooks and crannies of the process. If your student is giving information, most likely it is going to be used somehow by some company for targeting. There's a company that a lot of people always ask about called Raise Me. They've kind of coined this scholarship called a micro scholarship, which was to encourage students like in 9th and 10th grade to do certain activities. And when they did that activity, they would get a micro scholarship amount, but a student never actually got that money until they actually were accepted into a college that was going to offer these micro scholarships. But all along the way, students are interacting with Raise Me, they're sharing information, and all that information was then shared to colleges, and students, weren't aware of that. Maybe that bothers you, maybe it doesn't, but I just want to make people aware that that's what the process is that's happening. Okay, so now we're going to go into how do you find merit aid. I just want, again, to make people feel that there's an ebb and flow to this process. And the ebb and flow is that at some points, really the student and the family is in control. And then at other points, the college is a little bit more in control. And then it kind of goes back and forth. At this point in the research process, think about, you guys are in control. You're doing the research. You're making the decisions with your student about where they're going to apply. So that's why colleges are doing all this marketing. They want to get you to apply, but it's your decision where to apply. So that's kind of your power in the process at this point. And then once you do, your student does apply, kind of the power shifts a little bit, obviously, to the college to decide whether or not they will accept your student, but then it shifts back. And then when students are accepted, they get to make the decision about where they're going to attend. So, you can feel like, you are in control, as long as you are doing like the best research that you can and you have the information to make better decisions. That's really like all I can ask of anybody. But what I wanted to show you tonight is more of the data that you should be looking at to help make these decisions. Okay, so we talked about that. So let me just give you some tips, but again, before we get into the data. How many people on here know what their EFC is? And you don't have to tell me the number, but I'm just kind of curious if you've already gone through that type of exercise. Okay, no clue. Yes. Okay. And don't feel badly if you don't know. Okay. So, and again, kind of understanding how EFC is calculated is a whole discussion onto itself. So yeah, so Chris said not yet, FAFSA doesn't open until October 1st. So he's right. So your EFC is determined by a form called FAFSA, and it technically doesn't become available until October 1st, but that's the official form that you will need to fill out. I highly recommend that you go, and I'll tell you some resources, and calculate your EFC now. Do not wait till October 1st. It might be slightly different when you fill out the actual FAFSA form, but you should be within a $5,000 estimate of where your EFC is, and you can get to that estimate. And the one of the easiest places I recommend to go is actually, let me see if I can get the link pretty quickly. It's the College Board. I would just go, I'm just going to type in Big Future EFC calculator. And it's a really good calculator. I would absolutely do it to give you like a starting point, a sense of what you're measuring against. Here, I'm going to put the link in the chat. Okay, so go find that out if you don't. Second, do you have a family budget? Have you thought about that? Do you know, regardless of what your EFC is, but do you know how much you can spend on college? Again, you don't have to tell me what the number is, but have you kind of gone through that exercise? Have you, just looked at your own financial resources, your savings, what you can pull out of just your income? Okay, great. Well, okay, it looks like more people know their budget than they do their EFC. That's okay. I'm glad that at least people have started, defining their budgets. And so here's the issue between EFC and budget. So if you have an EFC that is less than the school's cost of attendance, you have the potential of getting need-based aid if that school offers need-based aid. So that's why it's important to know what your EFC is. And I'll just, again, throw out some numbers. But let's say your EFC is 40,000 and the cost of attendance at the schools that your student is looking at is between 60 and 70,000. The fact that the cost of attendance is higher than your EFC means that you have demonstrated need. But the other caveat is that the school that your student is looking at has to also offer need-based aid. And I'll show you those numbers, but that's kind of the quick formula. So the other reason why it's important to know your family budget is you're going to find out that the way the government calculates your EFC is not, nobody agrees with it. It's always higher than you expect. So it doesn't, so the school, the government might say your EFC again is 40,000, but there's no way that you can pay 40,000 and your budget is 25,000. Those might be the numbers, but the college is going to look at the EFC. And there's really no way you can get around that. So the EFC on some level is the minimum amount that a college is going to expect you to pay, minimum. So just because your budget is 25,000, they don't know that, the schools, and they don't care, but you care. So you want to use that number along with your EFC when you're doing searching. You may not be able to get to your budget. I wish I could, promise that I could find a school. Well, I probably can find a school for everybody, to meet their budget. It might not be the school that their student is, willing to attend, but it's important to know what your budget is and how far off you're willing to go from that budget. And kind of that's where you and your student are going to have to make trade-offs. So again, going down the search lists, know your EFC, know your family budget. Then those two numbers are going to help you determine, am I looking at schools that are going to give me need-based aid, or am I looking at schools where I need to find merit scholarships? Most people are looking at schools with merit scholarships because your EFC is higher than you want it to be or you expect it. And there aren't that many schools that are really good at giving need-based aid. The best schools that give need-based aid are very selective. So it's this whole conundrum of you might have a financial need, but then your student may not be able to get into those schools because they're just so crazy selective. So my recommendation, and again, I'm going to show you the example, is start with a wide, net of the type of schools that you're willing to look at, or let's just start with as few of criteria as possible. Because again, I'm going to show you that as you quickly add on criteria, you really narrow down schools faster than you expect, and you might miss a school that could be affordable, might not be in the exact location that your student is interested in, but has everything else. So I just say, start as wide as possible, see what that wide list is, and then start chipping away as you add on these other kind of wants. So I would start with your needs. So to me, your EFC and kind of where your student is in the top of the class is a need. And then the wants are things like location and school size and frats and that type of stuff. When you're building a college list, I always recommend that you include your state school, at least included in the consideration of all the schools that you're looking at. It will tend to be the least expensive, or on the least expensive side of the schools that are going to be on the list, because that's the benefit, right, of having state residency. Some states are much more expensive, even if you're a state resident, than other schools. Again, I'm in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, I think, is one of the, it's not the highest, but it's like the second highest as a state resident, even the state schools. So who would have known? I wish I would have really thought about that 25 years ago when I decided to live. And it is not unreasonable. Some people, at the beginning of high school, actually purposely think of moving to a different state where their college costs are much lower. That's a different conversation. But my recommendation is include your state school, see how that state tuition compares to all the other private schools, and when you factor in merit scholarship. Okay, number 6, include what I call a leverage school. So a leverage school is a school that it might be in similar selectivity. A lot of times they're called peer institutions. And I would at least encourage you to kind of research some of the peer institutions to the schools that your student really wants to go to, and see if any of those peer institutions are more generous than the school that your student really wants to go to. And if that's the case, I would include them on the list to potentially apply to, because if your student gets into both these schools and one school is more generous than the other, but they're kind of competing schools, then that's a great kind of thing to have in your back pocket, again, for next year, if you're going to do any sort of financial aid or merit scholarship appeals. So my purpose in all of these tips that I'm giving you is that you and your student have as wide of a range of options as possible. So, you don't want to be in the situation of next, April or March, where your student only got into 1 or 2 schools and they're potentially not affordable. You want to have just more options of either being able to appeal or just have a little bit of a range of financially of where you can choose to send your students. Okay. So somebody saying, how do you find peer institutions? Actually, it's right. What I suggest here, actually Google whatever the college name is. And I would say, like Tulane peer institutions. Not all, but a lot of colleges have, they kind of, it's like, it's like a group of friends. They run in a circle of colleges that they're all competing with. And so they have similar characteristics, and they collaborate together. And so they will sometimes have that information on their website tucked away. So that's the quick and the easiest way to see if you can find the peer institutions. A little bit more complicated way, which I'll show another time, is to go into IPEDS. And IPEDS is the government database of all college data, and you can find it there that way, but it's a little bit messy kind of going through different databases. So I would first try and Google. If you can't find it, message me, or I'll have another session and we'll go through how you find a peer institution on IPEDS. Okay, so include financial safety schools. So I will challenge you that, again, once you know your EFC, once you know your budget, at least look at the schools where you know that you could absolutely afford them, and see if there's a school in that grouping that you can see if your student is interested in. So at least you can have one or two of the schools on the list that are absolute financial safeties that you don't have to worry when the acceptance information comes through, like whether or not you can afford it. Oops. Okay. Again, some more searching tips. I love that you guys are here tonight and you're starting early, and I would keep up the momentum. And what I mean by that is try and really narrow down, or at least get to 80% of what your student's school list is going to be, honestly, by June, and then spend the summer starting these essays and getting the Common App just done and out of the way before school starts. It will help on so many levels. One, you and your student will have the summer to manage these essays. It does get to be a lot. That's just the way it is. And so to have to manage essays and start senior year, it's just a lot of pressure. The second thing is that the earlier your student can apply, particularly if any of the schools on his or her list have early action, absolutely, there should be no question that they should be applying early action. If any of the schools are rolling admissions, you want to get it in there within the first few weeks of the rolling admissions opening up. So the benefit is that they will get this work done earlier, and it'll be off their plate and your plate. They will hear back from schools, particularly the rolling admission schools, pretty early. There are schools that send back acceptances, starting end of August or September, or beginning of October. And it's just so nice for you and your student to know that at least there's one place that they got accepted to, and it just really takes the pressure off. And then finally, on some schools, it is a little bit of a first come, first serve syndrome in terms of the money. So they want, the colleges, as much as you want to get this process over with, right? So they sometimes tend to give a little bit more money to the students who apply early. First of all, they have their whole budget in front of them, so they can afford to give a little bit more. And also they're incentivizing your student to just make this, like, finish up. If your student gets a good offer from a school, and that's a school that they really want, and they kind of say yes, like, yes to the dress, we're done. It just, it simplifies the college's side of the equation, and it simplifies your side of the equation. So there is an incentive on both sides to give out acceptances as early as possible, give a little bit more money to close the deal, and then just have everything finished as early as possible in the fall. You're going to look to see if there's any, and then early decision is a kind of a completely different decision to make. I'm not going to go into detail on it now. We can have a whole nother discussion about it. I would spend a lot of time if your child wants to apply early decision and if you agree to it, because it is somewhat binding, although there's a lot of arguments about that. I would say it's more ethically binding. There's nothing legally binding about it, but you want to kind of go in with it with the intention that if your student is accepted, that you've done the research, you know how much it costs, and your student is going to, accept it and continue with it. But that's another discussion I'll leave. And there's a lot happening in the early decision. So that will be a fun discussion. And then if there are any honors programs, and I would definitely look into them, besides a lot of other perks that relate to the honors programs, like, maybe getting to select the classes early, getting better housing. There's usually some extra scholarship money about being accepted to an honors program. So definitely ask about those programs. Again, there might be some additional applications to get reviewed to be into the honors programs, but it will definitely be worth it. Okay, we're going to look at four-year graduation rates. We talked about the requirements to maintain merit scholarships. Start keeping track of all the deadlines and the dates, because you just don't want to miss one, again, because you can't roll back. And then the last thing is, I don't know, some people may have already created a separate email account with their student for this whole process. I recommend that your student has a different email address than what their current one is, or if they have even a different one from what their school email address is, just because they're going to get so much email and you don't want it to get cluttered in their normal inbox, if they even look there, which I'm sure they don't. But maybe they would also agree that in this separate email address, which is just for college purposes, that you both have access to it, because I've heard too many stories where a college, reached out to a student actually and offered a scholarship, and the scholarship was only offered through email, or they encouraged them to apply to a scholarship and the student missed the deadline, and it was all happening through email. So, if there could be, a parent set of eyes on the email in addition to the student, I would recommend that. So, but that's your family dynamic, however you want to work that out. Okay, so I'm going to stop and then jump into actually looking at College Insights and show you how that works. Okay, can you guys, can you guys see College Insights? Yes, thank you. Okay, let me just get the chat up again. Okay, and I know there's been some questions. I'll go back in a little bit and look at them. So if you go and you try out College Insights, this is what it will look like when you first come, and you get to set up your first college list by putting in 5 colleges. I'm going to bypass that because I already have an account. But if you don't have an account, you can set up this first college list. You pick 5 schools, and then it brings you into College Insights so you can see how it works. And then you can decide if you want to get full access to it. But I'm just going to jump in right now, and we will show you all the data that's here. So while this is loading up, the data that we have compiled here, I will, some of it, or I would, a good chunk of it is I was going to say it is public data, but it's just scattered out there. So wait, somebody might be unmuted. Okay, so the data that's in College Insights comes from the government, comes from this source that I mentioned called iPads. But a chunk of the data comes from something called the Common Data Set. So just curious, anybody or how many people are you guys are familiar with Common Data Set? Okay, great. And again, we could have a whole nother session on common data set. I think it's really fun to kind of go through the common data set. So I see if one or two people said no, they don't know what it is. The common data set is kind of what the word says. It's data that almost every college fills out in a common format. You could Google each school's individual common data set, just put in the name of the school, like Tulane and the word common data set. It will bring you to a page on the school's website. They will probably show you the last 10 years worth of common data set profiles. It's really actually as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. All the colleges use the same format, and the information is collected by 3 sources. It is collected by US News and World Reports. I don't really know whose brainchild the common data set was. I think it might have been US News and World Report. They basically, this is their way of US News and World Report. This is how they got all their information that they use for the rankings. And so in addition, the other company that uses it is the College Board. And the third company is a company called Peterson's, which is an educational company. And they're the only place where you can, and where you can license the data. So if people want to spend that much time and energy, I mean, you could Google every school that you're interested in and Google common data set, and then go through the common data set. It's, it's a lot of data that's in there, and you can pick out what you want and choose. That's all well and good. But what's hard is that there isn't necessarily a place where you can do what I would call a reverse lookup. So the example I just gave you, you have to know what school you're interested in, and then you've got to, Google that school and the common data set, but you don't know if there's other schools out there that might have similar numbers, because there's no place to kind of do that reverse lookup. But that's kind of one of the major reasons why we created College Insights, because we pulled together the common data set information, a little bit of what's in iPads, and we have information. It's this tab called Compare Offers. And we have crowdsourced people's offers for the past actually 3 or 4 years. And so you can see the actual numbers. I'll just pull one of them up. Let's see, like a Delphi. And we just added in, so you can go back for 3 years. So this is this current year, 2022, 2023. These are people who have put in their students' offers. A lot of them are from early action, some of them, from early decision, and they share with you what EFC range that their family is in, what state they're from, what their GPA, SAT, ACT score is, and then whether or not they got need-based aid or merit scholarship money. I will, say that I personally find it very interesting. I do say take this with a grain of salt, because it is crowdsourced information. We don't ask, as of now, we don't ask to see somebody's actual paperwork. That's something we might do next year. So I would say that this is all unverified information, but you do see at schools that have a lot of offers, you see the trends. You see, that certain students at certain GPA, SAT scores are getting certain dollar amounts. You also see that schools, particularly Merit Aid, give maybe more money to certain EFC ranges. So you get a little bit of a peek into the puzzle. And again, unfortunately, some schools, we are seeing decreases in the amount of merit aid that they used to give from previous years. So you would start to see that. You can go back and look at for the past 3 years what the dollar amounts were that the schools were giving out. Some schools are staying the same, some schools increase a little bit, but some schools we are seeing decreases from 2 main reasons. One is they've become maybe more selective and they feel like they don't need to give out more money. Northeastern is definitely one of those schools. So a big drop this year in the amount of merit aid that they've offered so far to students. And then the other reason is, quite honestly, just financially. In COVID, some schools had to tighten their budgets, and so they kind of cut back on the dollars of merit aid that they gave out. Okay. So So there's a lot of data here. I'm just going to quickly go through some of the more interesting pieces of data, and then I'm going to show you an example of how I would use College Insights to kind of narrow my list. But first column is just the type of school, and the icon with the 3 columns means it's a public school. The other icon means it's a private school. Obviously, we have the state that it's in. The region is actually a government identifier. It tells you, so it just helps to kind of group together, you know, if you want looking at the Northeast, at the Southwest, that type of stuff. We have a link to the school's virtual tour. This is just to make it easier. Number of full-time undergrads, just to give you a sense of the size. Percentage of the undergraduates that are women and percentage that are men. I don't have it in here now, but I just saw a big study on acceptance rates at schools broken out male versus female. It was very, very interesting. And I'm going to try and get that information here, because there are some schools that it's very clear that they give an advantage, you know, to one gender versus the other. And it was so clear when you can kind of like break out acceptance rates by gender. So we're going to try and include that information. Student faculty ratio gives you a sense, obviously, of how large the average class size is. Sophomore retention rate is actually pretty interesting and important to look at. It's really looking at how many students are coming back from obviously freshman year to sophomore. And, you know, I think that the average might be around 82% or the low 80s or something. So anything, you know, lower than that kind of might indicate that there's an issue going on, that something's happening. There are students that want to transfer or you know, that nature. I would use a lot of these numbers as like clues. You know, they, you know, if something seems off, or why does that seem so low compared to everything else? I would say like that would be a clue to me that I'd want to dig in further. I want to ask the admissions office, you know, what's going on, you know, what are there, it could be that maybe there are housing problems. It could be that students can't finish all the classes that they wanted to for their major. Lots of different issues, but you know, the numbers don't lie. And so the numbers kind of give you a clue to maybe ask more questions. So 4-year graduation rate. Believe it or not, I don't know if for the people who've started really searching at colleges, that it is not easy to find the 4-year graduation rate. And that is because the government only mandates that colleges share with you the 6-year graduation rate. So colleges really only want to do what they have to do. And so if the government says you only need to show the 6-year graduation rate, that's all they show. But I mean, we as, and your students and we as parents, right? Well, I don't really care about the 6-year graduation rate. I would care about the 4-year graduation rate, because I don't want to pay for year 5 and 6, right? And the worst part is year 5 and 6. If your student got any merit scholarships, it does not apply. So if your student has to go for a 5th year and a 6th year, for whatever reason, that's going to be at a full rate. So you want to be looking at the 4-year graduation rate. Again, there might be some really valid reasons why some schools have a lower than average 4-year graduation rate. It could be, for example, schools that are very heavily have a lot of STEM programs tend to have a lower 4-year graduation rate, because it just takes the you know, the STEM majors longer, or a lot of them might be in you know, 5-year programs. Schools that have co-ops tend to have really low 4-year graduation rates. In fact, I think if you looked up Northeastern here, they don't even give you the 4-year graduation rate, because they know that their co-op program is really meant that everybody graduates in 5 years. So it makes them look horrible. So there could be some very good reasons why a college has a below average 4-year graduation rate, but you won't know until you ask, or at least, you know, do a little research to make yourself feel better about if the 4-year graduation rate isn't where you think it should be. So next column is, this is if you want to know whether the school has an honors program. It's just a quick and easy way. Honors college, honors program, they're kind of similar. Every school has a different language for it. Whether, if you're interested, if the school has a co-op program, those are, personally, I think they're great. Some schools, a lot more schools are kind of adding that on, but it might be something that's important to you that you want to look at. I'm going to skip over the rest of this is all ethnicity percentages related to the school. And then we get to the section here, academic stats. And the other thing is you can quickly skip a lot of these sections if you go to the top of those tabs. So looking at academic stats, we have the average high school GPA, and then we have whether the SAT and ACT is required. Believe it or not, like only like when we first came out with this, which was right before COVID started, obviously knowing which schools were test optional versus which weren't was a big deal because not as many schools are. But now when you look through the list, the majority of schools are test optional. The big two school systems that aren't are Florida State and Georgia as a state system. They're not test optional. But anyhow, so that information is there. Then we have average SAT, average ACT, and the other two columns are really, again, pieces of information that are really important that are just harder to get on other websites. In fact, actually, I don't really ever see them on other websites. And that is the 75th percentile for the SAT and the ACT. And the reason why that those are so important, and we'll talk about if your student didn't take the tests, but if your student took the test, those scores are really important because that's the indication that tells you that your student's stats put them at the top of the academic range of the particular school, and the top 25th percentage, or the students that are at or above the 75th percentile, those are the most attractive students to that school. Those are the students most likely of any of the students to be offered merit scholarship money. So when you're building your students' college list, you want to have a good number of schools where your student kind of is the most attractive student that at that school, because the school is going to offer them the best money. Not every school on the list, your student has to fall in that criteria, but you want, at least 3 or 4. And then you'll know that there's a really high likelihood that your student's going to get in there, and a really high likelihood that they will get merit scholarship money, and they may even get the highest merit scholarship money. So, so going back to high school GPA, and we started talking about GPA earlier, how, it's really hard to kind of use or know if you can use your student's high school GPA versus the college GPA. These numbers are from the college. So this is, and most likely, as you can see, most of them are below 4. These are unweighted GPAs. Because a lot of the colleges kind of strip away the weighting so that they can have a more apples to apples comparison. I wish that I could have a column here that said like 75th percentile GPA. The colleges just don't share that information. They only share average GPA. So we have no way of extrapolating what the 75th percentile is. But when you do your searches, I always, and I'll show you an example, I kind of like, if your student has a 3.9, I would say look at the schools where the average is like a 3.75, something like that, so that that your students will be above the average. But unfortunately, we don't have more detailed information than that. Okay, jumping our next column or next section. This is the admission rates. So we show you the overall admission rate, but then we break out if a school has any sort of early admissions, we break out what the early decision admission rate is, what the early action rate is, and then we show you what the regular decision rate is. And for schools that have those options of early admission, you will see that it really does make a difference to apply early. You'll see it in some of the numbers. And what happens is that those schools tend to accept a lot more of the students early, and so then they have fewer spots available for regular decision. So that's, again, the importance from a strategic standpoint of understanding the numbers and then deciding if your student, is going to apply early. The best option is that the school has early action so that they can apply and not have to commit, but you might make the decision that there is an advantage, and there are, I'm not going to lie, there are admission advantages to applying early decision at most of the schools, and you might decide that that's important. So anyhow, but at least you'll have the numbers to make that decision. And then the other column that we have that's kind of interesting is again, it shows you of the schools that have an early decision option, what percentage of the class do they fill early decision? So some of the numbers are kind of interesting or a little staggering. So here, so schools like Grinnell, they accept 70, they're taking 70% of their class early decision. So if Grinnell was a school that your student wanted to go to, I mean, you really better apply early decision, because your chances of getting in regular decision have really just been, cut away. Colgate, is accepting 62% of their class early decision. These are high numbers. So a lot of these selective schools are accepting 50% or more of the class early decision. Again, I'm going to bring this back down to business, right? I mean, they are locking in their revenue. If they're accepting that high percentage of their class early, it's because that means that they can secure their revenue early in the process. So they know by December that they've got 60% of the class set. They know how much revenue is coming in. That's really what it comes down to. But you should be aware of these numbers, and they may impact you and your students' decision. They may not, but at least you kind of know the playing field. Okay, keep going. So these are the deadlines related to early decision, early action, early decision 2, which is like the second round of early decision that more and more schools are having, and then regular decision. And then this financial aid deadline is related to regular decision financial aid. There is a separate, which we should include it, and I don't know why we don't, but there's a separate deadline that is for if your student is applying early action, early decision, there's usually a much earlier financial aid deadline that's closer to those early admission deadlines. Okay, so going to, this next section is need-based aid. This is for, if you're in that situation where I talked about earlier, where your EFC is less than the cost of attendance, and we have the cost information here. So let's just look at Davidson College for a second. Okay, so Davidson's cost of attendance is 70,000. Let's say your EFC is 40,000. So obviously your EFC is less than the cost of attendance. Then I would jump back to need-based aid. I'd say, oh, look, Davidson actually meets 100% of need. So in my example, there's about $30,000 of need. If your student applies to Davidson, they are saying, we will give your student whatever that difference is in need. So we will give them $30,000. My guess is, and we'll jump ahead, that because Davidson is so generous with need, they're not giving merit scholarships. So let's do a quick jump to merit scholarships for Davidson. And they only give 6% of students that don't have any need merit scholarships. So that's kind of the scale. If a school is giving need, they're giving very little merit. There are, if a school is giving a lot of merit, they're probably giving less need. There are a few schools, and these are the best, right, that are in the middle that give good need and good merit. You got to find them. There's not, there's not a ton of them, but they are there. And that's the best of both worlds. If you if you might have some sort of financial need, and you could have a financial need that's 10,000. I mean, but look at the prices of tuition these days. So if your ESC is anything less than 70,000, you could have need. And so if you could find that school where they're going to give you a little bit of need-based aid and merit money, that's a good win. Okay, so then same thing. So we already jumped to merit scholarship. So this merit scholarship section, the first column says, what percentage of the freshmen that are enrolled at that college have no need? Again, this idea of need is not whether you think you have need, it's whether the numbers tell the college you have need. So is your EFC less than the cost of attendance? So at Lafayette, 65% of the students don't have need. It just also gives you a sense of maybe what the socioeconomic makeup of that school is. Not good or bad, but it, if basically 65% of the students had an EFC that was above the cost of attendance. That, just tells you a little bit of something. At Lafayette, they are saying that they give 20% of the students who don't have any need, 20% of them, they end up giving merit scholarship money to. And the average merit scholarship amount is 23, close to $24,000. So it's an average. So there are some students that are going to get above the 24,000 something, some schools that students that are going to get below. This other column here is we give you the kind of the quick link or the jump to, if I press that will bring you to the page on Lafayette's website that talks about their merit scholarships. So you can kind of quickly start researching more to see all the things we talked about. What's the deadline? Is it a separate scholarship application? Maybe they have a chart. Maybe they tell you what the minimum GPA requirement is for renewing. So, we're just trying to kind of jumpstart you and cut out as much research time to make the process faster. And then the next column too, if a school has a full tuition or full ride scholarship, we just have found that out for you and we give you the link. I wouldn't, a lot of schools really don't, but if that school has it, we let you know. And if they have it, they're usually, only giving it to, it's not a scholarship they're giving to a lot of students, but again, you should take a look at it because maybe, and we've worked with students this year who got, I can't remember where, but got really high, good scholarship amounts. And it's because they knew about these scholarships ahead of time at the beginning of the process, and they were able to prepare and do all the paperwork for it. Okay. So let me jump over to the left side. So when on the left side here, we have the option to, you can make any sort of list that you want. So as you're doing this searching, if you say, I want to save Lafayette, well, I can even save them to an existing list. And I have lists that I've made here for other people. So I might want to add them to a list. And you can name the list whatever you want, or I might want to create a new list. And you can, what I really recommend, make lots of different lists, and then you can pull them up and kind of look more specifically at just the schools on that list, and it makes it easier to do your comparisons. So if you already had a saved list, you can go back here and pull it up from this section. Or if you have specific schools that you want to look at, you're not quite sure what the numbers are, but you're a student, you've been talking about these particular schools and you know exactly which ones you want to look at, you can come here and you have to unclick where it says all schools, and you just type in whatever the schools are that you're interested in looking at. And then the last section is if you don't know what's out there and you want to kind of just do some pure searching. And here's where I would recommend, here's my example. I actually have it on my other slide, so I'm not going to jump back there. I think I said, let's assume that a family has an EFC of 50,000, but their budget is 30,000, and their student has an ACT of 29 and a GPA of 3.8. Okay, so let's use that as the profile and start to do some searching. So what I would do, and what I just told you is what I would consider their needs. That's the family, that's the needs that most of the colleges on their student school list need to meet, right? Their wants are things like the student's interested in going to a large school. The student wants to go to schools in California and Florida, and the student is interested in majoring in business. That's kind of the major is kind of like an in-between of a need and a want. But those are the secondary things we're going to search for. So in the profile I just gave you, I'm only going to search using this student's ACT to start with. And we narrow it down. It's a 2-point range that you have to pick. So I'm going to pick the range of 28 to 30. And I'm going to say that I want to see schools where that range of 28 to 30 is in the top range, or at or above the 75th percentile. Okay. So, and that's it. That's, oh, you know what? Here, I'm going to take these off, the locations. And that's all I'm going to search for. Okay. So this is the list. This, I don't even know how many on here, but there's more than like 3 pages full. So it's a pretty broad list. What I would do now, so I know that every school on this list, if I looked at, and let's look at it now, if I look at the academic stats, that 75th percentile, that every one of these schools has an ACT of between 28 and 30 in that 75th percentile. Okay. So now I want to jump to the merit scholarships and say, because now I've already narrowed it down. I know that every school on this list, my student's going to be in that top range, but I want to see now which of these schools are actually giving the best merit scholarship money. So I do come to the merit scholarship section, and I would sort, let's do highest to lowest. I don't really, and say, which of these schools give the most, right? So off the bat, so I see now already in this narrow range, all I've narrowed the schools down to is by test score. I now see the top schools that are giving, well, I mean, top merit scholarship schools that want to attract that student that has, that in that 28 to 30 percentile or ACT range. So Beloit, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Beloit, a really, very interesting liberal arts school on the smaller side, is giving an average of $40,000 in merit to 97% of the students who don't have need. So if your student applies there, they have a pretty darn good chance of getting accepted and getting a good merit scholarship. Well, let's look at their costs. So Beloit is expensive, no doubt about it. It's $64,000. But if your student got that $40,000 merit scholarship, that's bringing Beloit down to $24,000. That's close to the budget that this family had. So here's how, like, you need to look at the numbers. And I would honestly just keep going down this list and seeing what the average merit scholarship is, how it compares to the cost of attendance. And if I subtracted that merit scholarship from the cost of attendance, where would that final number be relative to my budget? Now, your EFC is in the profile example of the family I said, like that family had a $50,000 EFC. So that $50,000 is less than the cost of attendance. In theory, they would have need. Let's just jump to need-based aid for Beloit. And Beloit says they actually give 97% of need. So they meet 97% of need. So my guess is some way between the need-based aid and the merit that Beloit is going to make most families, particularly the families that with their students are in the top range, they're going to cover their costs from what their EFC difference is, even up to the cost of attendance. In some cases, depending on if the student qualifies for even more merit, they might even get them to below their EFC. That's just one example of a college. But this is how you kind of look at the numbers. And I so wish I could say, here's this formula, here's this calculator, drop it in and you'll get your perfect number. You should, on all of these schools that you're considering, run their net price calculator. We have it here. I mean, again, it's just a quick shortcut. Here, this should be the link. Link, here it is in this column, link to the net price calculator. You should run the net price calculator and see what the net price calculator number is compared to these estimates. And I will call them estimates that we're talking about here. these are estimates because we're basing it on an average merit number. We're basing it on what your estimate right now is of your EFC. But if the net price calculator is close to the estimate of what we're talking about, that's probably in the ballpark of what the school is going to cost you. A big if is that, or a big caveat is that, unfortunately, not every net price calculator is accurate. And there's really no way of knowing their accuracy. I wish that there was. If a net price calculator is asking for your students' grades and their test scores, it is more likely, the more questions that the net price calculator asks, the more likely that it will be accurate. But you know, again, I'm just kind of giving you all the pieces of the puzzle to kind of pull together, and so that you can look at it. I can't say that any one of these is unfortunately, none of these are 100% accurate, but you're kind of pulling together information. And if you start to see that a lot of this information kind of corroborates itself, then you know that you're moving in the right direction. Okay, so let me continue with my example. So all we did here was search by an ACT score. Let me just diverge for 1 minute, and I'm probably going to try and finish up. And I apologize, it's almost like an hour and a half, and I didn't even do my regular presentation. So you can see how much information there is in what we're talking about. But so the question is, right, if your student didn't take the SAT, didn't take the ACT, that's perfectly fine. You could do this type of searching that I just talked about with the GPA. What I would do is you can select a GPA here, and then I would, you know, in the example, because all we have is the average, if your student's GPA was, you know, whatever, a 3.9, I would just choose a slightly lower average to search for, and then you'll, you know that your student's average is at the top range. Or another way to do it is you can take your student's GPA and convert it to what it might have been as an ACT or an SAT score. And I'll put this in the follow-up, but I'll also put this in the chat right now. These are two charts that convert a GPA to an ACT, or here's the GPA to an SAT. Again, not like 100% perfect, but these are good, like, trial and error things to use. You know, I would definitely use your student's GPA, but I would also convert it to an SAT and ACT and see if you get similar schools or slightly different schools. But so going back to this example, so let me go back to where I had the 28 to the 30. So now let me add on, in this case, if the student really wanted a certain location, right? Let's say I said that they wanted to be in the warm weather. So let's say they wanted the far west, which we'll consider to be like the California, and they wanted to be in the southeast, like Florida. Okay, and so by just adding on that location, right, it's gonna start to really narrow the schools. So now we're only down to one page of schools that fit the criteria. Before, we actually probably had 3 or more pages. So that's all I'm saying, to give you the example of to start the search with as minimum number of factors or filters that you can. Like, really start the search to say, where is my student like at the top range of the school? And then look at those schools. And then you could even like creep it down. Okay, where is my student in the average range? But if merit scholarship and meeting your budget and money is a factor, then you want to have at least, you know, 4 schools on the list, maybe 5, where they are absolutely in that top range, and you know that your student will get the merit money, and you know that you can get close to whatever it is your budget is. So I just wanted to show you how quickly things start to narrow. Let me put one other factor in. Let's just say, again, I said in this example that the student only wanted to go to large schools. They want that big school feeling, you know, and so let's start filtering this down by schools that have 10,000 or more, you know, undergraduates. And it's an even smaller list, right? So, and as you can imagine, the big schools tend to be the state schools. And the state schools, those tend to give a lot less merit money than the private schools. So that's the name of the game. The private schools give the most merit scholarships. They tend to have a high cost of attendance, so it depends on how much merit scholarships they're giving to see how far down that discount's going to be. But just the way that private schools have developed, over the past 250 years of higher ed, private schools tend to be smaller schools as compared to the state schools. So these are all the trade-offs you need to discuss with your student as you're searching, as you're creating your students list. And it may have to be a balance of all of these things. That's why you can see over the past few years that the number of applications that students are filling out, the number of schools that they are applying to, has unfortunately got to be larger and larger. It used to be that, we'd say like 7 or 8 schools, is the max that you should apply to now. And you can't prevent it. Kids are applying to like 12, 15 schools. And it's because you're not quite sure, really of what the money is going to be. That's really what it comes down to. You're not quite sure until the acceptance comes in what the dollars are going to be. And because of that uncertainty, because of the uncertainty of money and because of the uncertainty of being accepted at the more selective schools, students are applying to more schools in general, and which really just makes the whole process harder and harder for everybody involved. So that's kind of all I have tonight. And let me just go through, see if there's any like burning questions, but I can also answer some of these. Here's a question. Are all colleges and universities in the US in this database? Yes, this is all US colleges. There's like some of the top Canadian colleges, but we don't have European schools in here. My daughter is a sophomore in high school. When do you recommend using this tool? That's a really good question. So there is a monthly fee to use the tool. You can look at the 5 colleges that you use to create your first list. That's completely free. But to do all the searching that I showed you and looking all the data for all these schools, it's a monthly fee of $24.99. A lot of people, and this is perfectly, I think, fine, might use it for a month, kind of do a lot of searching, and then put it aside, and then come back, maybe like a few months later or when they want to finalize things, and then re-sign up then. We actually save all of your lists information, so you can kind of use that, kind of jump on and off. So for Lisa, for your question about your daughter's a sophomore, how I would use this list is that you still have the time, your daughter still has the time to either improve their GPA or potentially do some testing. So I would do the list to kind of like, or use this College Insights to say, like, what's my daughter's goals? Like, what does she, what type of GPA does she want? Like, what type of school is she interested in going to? And therefore, what's the GPA that she needs to build up towards? What's the test scores that she needs to build up to? So I would use it in that planning way. Again, you probably only need to use it for a month and then cancel temporarily. And then as you get much closer, when she's a junior, you might sign on again. Okay, so let's see. Mary's asking, what if the NPC gives you a different result based on your financials versus EFC? There was a significant difference and it was a state school, so maybe there's an issue with the algorithm. Mary, yes. I mean, again, none of these net price calculators I would vouch for in any sort of 100% accuracy. If you think that something's really off, this is a great question. It's a great question also for your student and along with you, that they should reach out to the financial aid office and just say, something's a little wrong, or maybe I entered the information incorrectly. Could somebody look this over? But I'm not quite sure that your net price calculator is giving me an accurate number. And they might tell you that the net price calculator isn't accurate, but at least you've kind of like identified it early. Are majors offered by each school one of the criteria? Yes, on the searching side, I didn't show that as an example, but majors, we have all the majors here, and you could select a major and it will kind of help filter the schools that show up on your list. Can I copy an existing list to create a new list and delete some colleges? Yes, so you can create you can kind of create a list. Like if you knew a certain set of schools that you were interested in, I would come to this section that says search for specific schools. I would enter in all these schools, have it show up, and then I would just create a specific list for those schools. And then you can, save that individual list, pull it up whenever you want. But so you can definitely kind of create a list of schools that are particular to whatever criteria you have, and then name them and save that list. So are the tuition dollars, which is the cost of attendance, listed are per year? Yes, they are the yearly cost of attendance. Okay. Well, I'll read through the rest of the questions here, see if there's anything that sticks out, and then add the information in the follow-up email. And we will send out a link to the recording tomorrow. I will say one other just thing that you guys know. So we offer this college insights database. I'm all for creating things that I call for the DIYer, for the family that wants to do as much research as they can on their own. I love to help with that. That's my kind of personality of how I like to do things. And I want to help anybody else who wants to do as much of their own research as possible. In addition, and you'll get an invite, we also do have a program which we call a concierge service, which is maybe a little bit one more hand-holding step than just using College Insights. And we are sent out maybe, and I can't remember honestly if the email already went out or will go out tomorrow, but we have monthly sessions for people who are in this concierge service. And they are live sessions on all the topics that you need to know, kind of similar to what I did tonight, but it goes into a lot of detail on, honestly, on calculating GPA, on making your students course selection, letters of recommendation, what is in demonstrated interest, how do you do it, researching a college or visiting colleges. So they're all live sessions. They're with private college counselors and some financial aid experts. And anyhow, we are inviting anybody who wants to come to check that out. It's on, I think it's Tuesday. You'll see that in the invite. That's just something else if you wanted to consider in kind of this process of of managing the admissions and the paying for college process, something else like in your arsenal if you wanted to take advantage of. Okay, thank you guys.
Take a quick question. I learned from you today that about the talent scholarship, and I'm just curious, do talent money get awarded to kiddos who are not necessarily applying to that major? For example, if someone's going more for a STEM type major, but still wants to apply for maybe an art scholarship or something like that, does that work? Have you heard of something like this?
I have actually heard about it. It's going to depend on the school. So some schools only give it to the students who major in, and at some schools they give it regardless of what your major, even it's just if you have that talent. So I guess the answer is it's a depends answer, and you just have to kind of like dig into and see what at the particular schools your student's interested in.
Very good. Thank you so much. So helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Good night, everybody. Take care. Thanks for hanging this far with me. Talk to you soon.